two, one, and we are recording. I think we're recording. Still
Yep, I
you.
just got a little message saying that recording in
Yeah,
progress.
yeah.
So,
Fuck them. Don't talk to them. I'm trying different things. As I explained to you, it's not important, but none of it's important. We don't even talk about it. Mr. Michael Vecchione, and last time we talked about Murder on the Bridge,
we
which was
did.
I mean, that I was actually thinking about that yesterday. Like, man, it's not enough that he strangled her and then made it look like a rape, but to go back and burn the body. I mean, how does that affect you as you go on? Does it make you less patient with future criminals? Does it strengthen your faith in God because opposites imply, light implies dark, cold implies hot, evil implies good? What what and also because I'm a moron, for all the new listeners, Mr. Vecchione, please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Michael Vecchione, and I'm an attorney, and I was a prosecutor in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office for over 30 years, and I spent the last 13 or 14 of those as chief of the Rackets Division. Before that, chief of the Homicide Bureau. So I did a lot of trials. I wasn't an administrator, uh, only an administrator, I should say. I was one of those guys who got into the trenches and did the trials, and I did nothing. I did everything that I asked my guys and women to do who worked for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I did investigations, the worst of the worst. And one of those was Raymond Vargas, the guy who is the centerpiece of Murder on the Bridge. I likened him to, quite frankly, in the story, I likened him to the devil
Mm-hmm.
coming to Brooklyn. He was that evil. And one of the things that struck me, and I'll answer your question in a second, but one of the things that struck me about him was he was a guy who was one of these lazy sons of bitches who didn't work, who always looked to, live off someone else, if not the government and friends, etc. And he was a junkie, and he was always hitting on one of his best friends, an older guy who was a family friend who was kind enough to take him in. And in the worst days of Vargas's life, this guy took care of him, allowed him to stay in his apartment, fed him, gave him money, did the things that a friend does and the things that a father does or a mother does. And at one point, Vargas went to his apartment with his girlfriend, if you want to call her that, to essentially rob him, rob
Mm-hmm.
his friend because he was looking for money. And the friend had told him, "Listen, I'm done. I can't give you anymore." And he went to the apartment to essentially take his money. And of course, there was a scuffle, and Vargas killed him, killed his
Yeah.
best friend. I mean, talk about biting the hand that feeds you. This guy cut off the hand that fed him, and it ultimately led to his downfall, as I explained the last time. And he stole his wallet, stole his credit cards, and cut a deal with a guy at a gas station with one of the credit cards to run up numbers with the credit card, so the credit card company would pay the gas station, and then the gas station would give a piece of that to Vargas in cash. And it ultimately led, as I said, to his downfall because the police were on to him because of that. It was easy to investigate him. They didn't even know that he had killed this young woman on the Williamsburg Bridge until another girlfriend gave him up inadvertently. She she was picked up to ask by the detectives to ask her where he was because they were looking for him for this for the murder of his best friend. And said to him, she said to the cops, "Are you looking for him because of that little girl he killed on the Williamsburg Bridge?" And the detective told me that he literally jammed on
Yeah.
the brakes in his car, and he turned around and said, "What are you talking about?" It was a big cause celeb in that precinct, the death of this young Hasidic girl. And that, and then they ultimately set up this thing where they were going to meet. She was going to meet him, and the cops were going to arrest him, and it turned into a big chase through the streets and through the homes of Brooklyn, in the Greenpoint and Williamsburg section of
Hmm.
Brooklyn. So, but Vargas had was the kind of guy who was a total sociopath. He did not have empathy in him. He did not have any kind of sympathy. He had nothing other than I'm looking out for myself, and whatever is in the way, I will get rid of.
Hmm.
Um, and as I mentioned to your listeners last time with the bridge, he was on the Williamsburg Bridge on a quiet Sunday morning looking for marks. He was trying to rob people, and unfortunately, this little, I say little, but she was a young kid walking across the Williamsburg Bridge doing exercise because she was a little overweight, and that was one of their exercise regimens to walk the bridge. She had no money on her. She had nothing. She was just walking the bridge. It was going from Brooklyn to Manhattan, Manhattan back to Brooklyn. And he encountered her and dragged her by her scarf. It was cold. It was December, and to a portion of the bridge, and strangled her to death because she had no money. And then to make it look like it was a sex crime, he took her clothes off and penetrated her with his hands, and then left. And it wasn't until his junkie girlfriend told him that we got to go back and burn her. Later on that night, they got a can full of gasoline, went back to the bridge, found her body where he had left it, and burnt it to basically almost beyond recognition. The only thing left in the way that she was identified is through dental records. Her teeth were still intact.
Jesus.
So this is a guy that that deserved every single day he got in jail. Every single day, Tom. I convicted him for the young woman's murder first. Then we tried him for the death of his friend, and I convicted him in both cases. He got 25 to life consecutively in both cases. So Raymond Vargas is the kind of person who, if a parole board released him, he'd be back on the street killing people once again,
Hmm.
without any doubt in my mind. That's how bad a guy he was, with no remorse, none whatsoever. He confessed to the police, and I think you remember me talking about how he told the cops that this young woman came to him every night, and she haunted him
Hmm.
essentially in his dream. So, and I said to myself, good. Hopefully, she haunts you for the rest of your breathing days. So.
For so for you, is it so? So it's very easy for me, 30-year-old, who, again, I get to do a podcast for a living. I get to turn on the air conditioner and sit in a leather chair. It's very easy for me to dictate from my detached tower on how things should be.
Right.
I tend to flip flop back and forth in my life, and I would say where I am now, my most current up to date viewpoint is that we shouldn't have the death penalty because, one, do we become the monster by killing, and two, is one wrongful conviction, let's say for whatever reason I end up in jail and I get the death penalty and I'm innocent, is one wrongful conviction enough to do the death penalty? But then furthermore, and I would say this is 99% of the weight of my opinion, is you'll hear people say, by people I would probably say like my extended family or friends, it's a drain on the state. Just if someone's a convicted murderer or child molester, just fucking ice them, kill them. I don't, I don't, I get that point. I look at it more. The point of me saying all of this is when you're dealing with people like that, is it, do you think they suffer more by, like, do you give them the easy way out and put them in the electric chair or give them lethal injection, or do you let them sit in prison for the rest of their life and be haunted by it, and you kill two birds with one stone? You also can say that you never put to death an innocent man. Where does
Well,
that sit with you for someone that has
okay.
seen it up close and personal?
Yeah, I have. Not only have I seen it, but I also served as the chairman of the district attorney's committee on the death penalty. I chaired a committee that decided whether or not defendants in certain cases that fit the parameters of the death penalty when it was in effect in New York should be given the death penalty or not. And I think that of all of the cases that we looked at, we probably voted on very few of them for the death penalty. And I think, and I have to say that personally, I was a big proponent of the death penalty, but not for what you think, not because someone deserved to die and because they killed another life. That's not the reason. The
Sure.
reason was I really truly believed that it was an incentive
Okay.
for people to not commit these types of crimes.
Okay.
And I think, but I've come to that opinion has kind of blunted a little bit because I've dealt with so many bad guys that I think that they don't even, that, you know, what I thought was something that they thought about all the time turned out to be not something that they thought about. These guys don't care. They don't think that far ahead in their lives that, you know, I'm going to get the chair or I'm going to get the needle or whatever it is. But here's the thing. I really, truly believe, knowing now what I know about prisons and jail and what goes on there and what doesn't go on in those prisons, because I've seen a lot of it, is that spending your entire life behind bars in a place filled with people who are barely human, quite frankly, is much, much worse than having you being put to death.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about, you're 30 years old. Let's say you go into prison right now on a life sentence without parole because it's a capital murder case. For the next perhaps 50 years, you will never see the outside of that prison. All you'll see is that little cell that you're in, the room that you spend your time with these guys who have done the same thing as you, who are, you know, who are certainly not people that you want to spend time with, eating the crappiest food, and maybe what you have to look forward to is a day where someone will come and visit you so you could have a few moments out of that cell to meet a real human being who cares about you. And then there's a penalty to that too, because you sit down across the table from someone who is your wife or your sister or your mother or your brother or your father, whoever it is, and then you get up and you have to leave them. They're going, you now know they're going back to life,
Mm.
a life in America where they can go to dinner and to the movies and on vacation. And you're going back to that, you know, 6x10 cell or whatever the hell you're in. And you've got nothing to look forward to, maybe until the next time they come to visit you. That's a heavy, heavy penalty to pay, Tommy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's, you know, and the other thing is you have to constantly be vigilant in terms of someone not liking maybe how you looked at them or what you said to them or an opinion you may have given in a discussion, or maybe you took the last scoop of you know, Jello, and the guy behind you now is pissed off at you because you know because you did that, and now he's going to look to, you know, to get you. Here's what I'm talking about. I'll give you a real example.
No,
I
I get it.
I
Yeah.
I had two wise guys who were going to be witnesses for me in a murder case. They were both in witness protection in jail. Now when these guys are in jail in witness protection, they're segregated with all of their type of people, all witnesses, people who are under protective custody, right? So my detective and I go to the jail. We sit down, bring the guy out, start talking to him, prepping him for the trial, asking him all the questions we need to ask. And he about, I would say maybe 40 minutes into the interview, he said to me, Mike, what time is it? So I told him. He said, okay. And I kept going. We kept going. A little while later, Mike, what time is it? So I said to him, his name was Marvin. I said, Marvin, where the fuck are you going? You're in jail. Where are you going? What do you need to know the time for? What he said to me?
What?
He said, today is yogurt day. Today, they give out before at a certain time, we get a chance to go and get this kind of strawberry or blueberry yogurt that they liked. If I miss that, he said, I don't get it again until like next week or maybe even 2 weeks from now. I don't want to miss that. That told me everything I needed to know
Okay.
about being in jail. That's
Okay.
what he was concerned about. Today is yogurt day. So
Okay.
it's think about it.
I think that's a bigger deterrence actually. You know, I briefly switched sides when you said it's a deterrence. I just shows how shallow my opinions are. I was like, you're right, it's a deterrence. Kill them all. But then no, man. I mean, everyone dies, so it can't be that much of a like no one gets Jeff Bezos, the president. Everyone goes. Man,
And people
that's
don't look at it. I've tried a lot of murder cases. I've defended a lot of murderers. I prosecuted a lot of murderers. I could count on probably one hand where someone thought about what they were doing. And they thought about it because perhaps because they were paid to do it. That's the thought for the most part. Other murders that I've prosecuted and defended were done, for ridiculous reasons. Some of them as stupid as fighting over a bottle of wine or something on the street because
mhm.
they were just pissed off at one another because a guy stole the other guy's
Yeah.
bottle of wine, that kind of thing. That's how base it was sometimes, Tom. So does that guy who did that think about, well, if I do this, I'm going to get the chair? No, he thinks I'm doing it because I want that bottle of wine back and I want to drink it. So
Yeah, yeah, a guy to think that far ahead would it's a catch 22. You wouldn't be on the street stealing wine and doing if you can think that far ahead, you'd probably be someone to go, "Hey, I don't like sleeping under a bridge. I'm going to get an apartment." Like
exactly.
so it kind of it's almost like it's like if we give him the death penalty, we assume he or she is going to hell, granted hell exists or whatever the afterlife or whatever. But by keeping them alive in a 6 by 10 foot cell where every 14 days they get yogurt, and the only people they're around are other demons who are locked in there with them, and now there's zero deterrent for them to ever act better because what does it matter? So they're just going to be, yeah, you took the jello, I'm going to shank you in the shower. In a weird, fucked up way, we're kind of ensuring that they experience some sort of hell
Yes,
and
it is. It is.
a fluorescent lit hell.
It's living hell, Tom.
It's
Living hell.
isn't that what
I,
the warden of sorry for interrupting you. I'm terrible
no,
at
it's
it.
okay.
ADX Florence,
Yeah.
it's like the super of supermaxes out in
Yep. Yep.
Colorado. I
Florence,
every
Colorado.
Yeah,
Yep.
everyone listening to this, yeah, Google ADX Florence. I did try to contact them a couple months ago, and they never got back to me. But the warden calls it the clean version of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the Rocky Mountains,
Hmm.
totally isolated from everything.
Yeah.
And I had a guy, a long term and a long time informant of mine who was there, who was the son of a notorious mobster named Gregory Scarpa. His name was Greg Scarpa Jr. And Greg Scarpa Sr. was the mobster. Greg Jr. was a mobster too, taught by his father how to kill and how to live in that world.
Jesus.
And Gregory, the kid, was sentenced to life in prison at AdMax at Florence.
Fuck,
And when I
man.
brought him out to testify for me and to help me in a case I was putting together against an FBI agent who had his father on the FBI payroll and was letting him commit crimes because he was giving the FBI information. So we brought him out to help us and to talk to him about his father and that whole, the whole situation. And the guys that went to pick him up, these are detectives, these are law enforcement people, told us that they were creeped out to no end by AdMax, that they were treated, these were strangers showing up to pick up a guy, even though they had all the credentials they needed. they were treated as if they were, I don't want to say inmates, but they were treated with the kind of attention that they weren't used to. They were restricted in where they could go, restricted in how long they could wait at a particular spot, restricted in where they could stand, that kind of thing, until this guy was produced. And when they took him out, they got him in the car, took him to the airport. They told me that they got on a plane right away. He's sitting in a plane, and this at that point, flight attendant came around and was asking if they wanted, refreshments or whatever. And this guy wanted, I think he wanted a 7-Up. And they gave him, and the detective said to me, Mike, you wouldn't believe it. We gave him the 7-Up. It was as if he was drinking gold. He had been in that jail for a couple of decades, hadn't had a soda, no soda in those jails. He hadn't had a soda since he was out on the street. He couldn't believe it, how good it tasted. And he didn't even know what cell phones were. He had no idea. When he got to the airport, before they got on the plane and they had to wait for to board, he was looking around at it was as if he was an alien who came down from Mars, who walked into into the United States, didn't know what was going on. It was unbelievable. And later on, when I got to talk to him, I said, Greg, they told me about the Coke, the 7-Up, and he said, Mike, he said, you don't understand what it is that I have gone through in that place. Now, he deserved to be there. He killed 35 people, so he deserved to be there.
Yeah.
When they brought him into New York, he was kept at the jail that Jeffrey Epstein was in when he got killed, the MCC. And I said to him, Greg, what's it like? Because he would come into my office to be debriefed, and he would be, first of all, he'd be shivering most of the time. This is now in the summer. He was looked like he had not slept. I said, what's going on? He said, first of all, the cell I'm in, it's isolated. I'm freezing. I can't, and what do I have? I have these clothes and I have what passes for a blanket. And second of all, they never turn the lights out. The light is on 24 hours. He said, so what kind of sleep do you think I get with that being the case? So when you say living hell, prison is a living hell.
Yeah.
Is a living hell. Let me tell you one other story.
No, go on.
When I was a defense attorney, I was representing a guy who had been arrested for a pretty severe drug case in federal court. He was being tried in federal court. And I went to the MCC, that same jail, to visit him, to talk to him about his case, etc. And there's one little area where the attorneys can talk to clients. It's kind of a 2-part area. There are several offices along one wall, or rooms, I should say, that you can speak privately. The rest of the discussions have to take place in kind of in a common room at a table. You're sitting there and other lawyers are there, etc. So I get into the place and I get my client, comes out, sits down, and I say, well, let's go into one of the rooms. And it was empty. He said, no, you can't do that. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, those are reserved. I said, reserved? He said, you don't understand. In here, there's a hierarchy. They were the wise guys who were in there had made sure that everyone knew that they were the only ones who could use those rooms with their lawyers. Nobody else could use them unless they got permission. So I had to sit there. I interviewed the guy, talked to him, got everything I had to get to. And then suddenly, as the interview's over, I hear the door that we use to get into this common room is locked. Then each of the windows around the room, the blinds or the shades are all dropped. So I said to him, now you're in jail, Tom. I said to him, what is going on? He goes, oh, they're moving the rats. They don't want anybody to see who's in the special sections of the jail. So So I said, how long does this take? He said, it could take, half an hour. It could take 10 minutes. It took about an hour. We were stuck in that room. Now, your mind starts to kind of play tricks on you. You say, what happens if they don't ever come? What happens if they don't come and unlock the door? What happens? That's the kind of fear you have and imagine living in a situation like that. So I get out of the room. This is the last part. I get out of the room. I made my way to the elevator as fast as I could. The elevator is packed now because remember, all the lawyers were stuck in that one place. So I get myself into the front of it. I'm at the edge of the door, and the door closes. Elevator now starts going down. It was on, I think, like the 5th floor, I think. So we get to the 4th floor, 3rd floor. The elevator stops. The door's open. Who's standing in front of me? John Gotti.
Jesus Christ.
He goes, how you doing, fellas? I guess I have to wait for the next one. I said, there was no room. Close the door. Tom, I couldn't wait to get my phone, to get my briefcase, to get everything. I couldn't
Get the
wait
fuck
to
out.
get out of there. It was
That's
incredible. So these
that,
are, I've had experiences with these jail things. I had another client, a friend of mine who turned out to be a
real
client.
quick, real quick. I was gonna say that sounds almost like a scene from like a modern version of like not Scrooge. Who's it was Scrooge who was visited by the ghosts of Christmas?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems like some modern nightmare where
yeah. It
in the
was,
movie it would show Mike Vecchione thrashing in bed and you're sweating and you're dreaming and it's a clean hell and like the elevator opened up and it's John Gotti like, hey, how's it going, fellas? And you're like, fuck, and
yeah,
goes down and the
exactly.
next one that opens up is Bin Laden or some shit. Sorry, go on.
Well, it's so it is. I really believe in what you said about it being what had the way you described. I had another friend client in one of the minimum security prisons in federal minimum security prison in Pennsylvania, Allenwood. You may have heard about it. It's one of these country club type prisons, right? So that's what people on the outside call it. When you go to Allenwood and you park your car and you go meet your client, you get into the building where you can meet him in a certain spot. It's much different. You get the feeling that you're in jail.
Hmm.
So we get to I meet my client. He was also was a friend of mine for a long time, and talk about his case, talk about him. It was a visit as well as a work visit. And at the end of the visit, he said to me, he said, Mike, can you do me a favor? I said, sure. What's up, Tom? His name was Tom too. He said, can you see those machines over there? They were vending machines. He said, you think you can buy me a sandwich from one of the machines? And I said, yeah, of course. I said, but why is it that why can't you do it yourself? Why can't you come with me? And he says, no, 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 no. In front of each machine, there was a line on the floor, like a red line or a yellow line. And the inmates were not permitted to ever cross that red line. So if they had a visitor who wanted to give them some cash to go, use for the vending machines, couldn't do it. I
Jesus.
had to go by. First of all, I knew this guy for years. You know what kind of heartbreak it is to have a guy say to you, who's my friend. I had dinner. I used to have dinner with him. He was a mentor as well. He was a lawyer who had gotten into trouble. And to now say to me, can you buy me a sandwich from a vending machine before you leave? And when I did, it was as if I had given him a gold bar. I have to tell you, it was like, and I said that to myself as I walked out, how could the food in a vending machine be better than what it was in the commissary or whatever it is, the mess hall that they have to eat in? But apparently it was because he was so grateful to me that I had done that for him. So this, jail is bad, Tom.
It's
And
it's right. Don't they say? I can't remember where, but I know one thing. Like it's a PO, it's not POW training, it's like captive training. It's Mike Durant talks about it, the pilot, the Mogadishu pilot that was shot down. He talks about training that like soldiers or pilots will go through about like what happens if you get captured by
Right,
an
right.
enemy state. And it's like there's a couple pieces of information you can give up and you're supposed to hold on to them and then let them up slowly so they think that they got something from you. But one of the things they do is they'll often just strip you and they'll do like a full body examination. It's under the guise of an examination, but really what it is it's a physician and they'll do it in front of whoever captured you. So let's say Russian soldiers capture you. Let's say me and a bunch of Russian soldiers capture you, Mike. Let's say I'm the physician. We'd strip you down and I would give you a full body examination, including like, going under your testicles and opening up your butt cheeks and like they're not doctors. They don't give a fuck. The idea is it breaks you mentally.
Humiliation. Yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
so humiliation. I mean, that's breaking someone. Hey, Mike, can you buy me a sandwich? That
Yeah.
it's breaking their soul. If I can twist this conversation kind of in a 180. So, have you seen Doctor Strangelove?
I
The
did a long time ago. I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen.
The important part is there's the doomsday weapon. If anyone launches a nuke, this thing blows
Right.
up the whole world. But Russia keeps it secret. And the Americans are like, the whole point of a doomsday weapon is you let everyone know because then it serves as a deterrent.
Turned.
It seems like so the death penalty, like you would say, does these guys aren't thinking that far ahead. All the things you're telling me, not that I have any intention of ever committing some capital offense, but this is driving into my head more than anything. Like death is better than this. Isn't wouldn't you want like a I feel like again, I know this is from a detached point of view where I have no dog in the fight. Wouldn't you want to somehow like almost like a C-SPAN type network, some government network, something that was just always on TV, like channel 500? Wouldn't you kind of want just like 24/7 circulating reruns of interviews of guys coming out of ADX Florence saying, "Can I have a 7 up?" And you'd want guys that go in there being the most badass hardened criminals and then it would fast forward 30 years and it'd show them like, "Can I like, sir, will you please buy me a sandwich?" You'd have to show these hard motherfuckers being broken. But the whole idea is no one's hearing about this, or at least I'm not. Wouldn't you want there to be some sort of deterrent? Like you're scrolling through the channels at night, and every once in a while, it'll be like an infomercial. You find a C-SPAN prison network, and it's like, here's John Gotti, and it shows him just as a broken soul. Wouldn't you
Well,
want a
they
deterrent?
Well, I agree that that would be a deterrent, depending upon how old and how inexperienced or experienced the person is who's watching. There used to be a show called Scared Straight,
Oh
which
yeah,
is exactly what you're talking about,
yeah.
where they would have kids who would be brought into a prison and they would be, talked to by the inmates and get a taste. Now, is it the kind of taste that would be a deterrent? For the average kid, yes. For some kid who may not be so, may not have may think that, I don't care what you're going to say to me. I'm going out and I'm going to make money however I can make money. Maybe it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be, because what some of these kids say is, I'm never going to get caught. I'm too smart for that. I know how to get around that. I know how to get past that. But I do think that there is some value to that, to having it shown to people uh, in a real setting, in like the ultimate reality show, in terms of this stuff. And I think that there are places that do it. These things are around. There are, videos that you can watch, and there are shows that are around, that kind of interview inmates and talk to them about how horrible it is, behind bars. I have a good friend of mine who's a detective, who is a retired detective, and I'm trying to get someone interested in letting me in getting his story published. I'd love to do his story, his book.
Bring it here.
And
Bring it here.
his the name of the book, that if it ever comes to fruition, is called Hard Guys Cry. and I'll tell you what it's about. My friend, whose name is Jimmy, was one of these hard-nosed cop slash then detectives in the NYPD. He was a street guy who I met because I tried a case involving a Black Liberation Army guy who killed two police officers on the streets of Brooklyn. And I met Jimmy during that case, and he and I hit it off and became friends, and we've been friends for the last 30 years. And he was the kind of guy, as he says, and he makes no bones about it, that when I caught you doing something, you had a gun, or if I caught you in the middle of a robbery, or you beat someone up, when I put him up against the wall, he said I had this kind of technique about how they should spread the legs so I can do the pat down. And it was kind of like he would kind of like kick their legs apart
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to ask them to spread. It just that was the way he wanted to, teach these guys that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. That's the way he treated them. And they didn't deserve respect in his mind. And and there are a lot of ways I agree with him. But so this is the kind of guy he was. And he later on graduated. I shouldn't say graduated. Got promoted to narcotics division, and then from there he got promoted. He got promoted to the Joint Terrorist Task Force. And this is in the old days of the Joint Terrorist Task Force, where the people they were chasing were the Jewish Defense League, Black Liberation Army, not the Black Panthers, but people of that ilk. And he tells me a story about he was assigned to a detail in front of a hotel in Manhattan where the leader of the Jewish Defense League, a guy named Meir Kahane, and his people were staying. They were going to give a speech, or they had given a speech, and he noticed one of these guys come out of the hotel, and he said to himself, I recognize this guy. Now, my friend was really studied all of this stuff. He's got a lot of records still in his car about the terrorists that he was investigating. And he recognized this guy, and he went over to an FBI agent and said, I think that's whatever the name was, so-and-so. He's wanted. The FBI agent said, forget it. That's not the guy. My friend wouldn't take no for an answer. So he follows him. The guy goes down into the subway underneath Madison Square Garden, Penn Station, Madison Square Garden, and he gets onto the platform. And my friend Jimmy is still following him. And the guy now turns around and sees him and recognizes the fact that he's got now probably a cop chasing him or following him. And he makes some kind of motion. My friend Jimmy stops, calls out, stops, tells him stop. And just as he's about to get on a train, my guy grabs him, pats him down, and he had a hand grenade. He had a grenade. And what he was going to do was he was first of all the wanted guy that my friend thought he was. He had this grenade on him. He was going to get onto a train in Penn Station underneath Madison Square Garden, and more than likely he was going to pull the pin and blow it. That's what was going on those days.
What the?
That's the kind of guy.
For what reason?
Just protesting. They were protesting. The Jewish Defense League was protesting. The so many things, the treatment of Jews in the United States, and this guy Meir Kahane was the leader, and it was like Yasser Arafat was
Mm-hmm.
involved back then. There were those kinds of things, and it was going to be, they thought, a big battle between the Palestinians, the Jewish Defense League, and that's why the cops were all around. Now, this guy, who knows if he was going to take that grenade and do it in the train, if he was going to take it somewhere else and do it, who knows? But the bottom line is my friend stops him. Anyway, so that's the kind of cop he was. He was really an intense guy. Ultimately, he's at home one night, and he hears some noise in his apartment, in his house. He lived in a 2-story walk-up in Brooklyn. And he gets out of bed. He's barefoot, puts on his pants, goes downstairs, and there's at least one burglar, if not two, in his house. takes out his gun, chases him down the street, out of the building, chases him down the street. The guy turns and Jimmy fires and hits him one shot right in his ass. Guy goes down, he gets arrested. The district attorney, I was out of the office at the time. I was in private practice. The district attorney at the time was a woman named Elizabeth Holtzman, who was a progressive. Now she would be called very, very liberal, anti-cops. Cops hated her.
Sure.
She she opened up a grand jury investigation into my buddy Jimmy for shooting the burglar. Luckily, the guy who got the case was a friend of mine. He calls me because he said, listen, I know you know Jimmy. Are you defending him? I said, yeah, why? What's happening? Well, there's a grand jury investigation opened up. So Jimmy goes in. I bring Jimmy in. He goes into the grand jury and testifies. Anyway, the bottom line is they dismissed the case. Jimmy was so disgusted with all of the work that he had done, all of the bad guys he had put in, all of the terrorists he retires, goes upstate, opens up a private investigation service, and he's now in private practice, doing investigations for lawyers, investigating and doing things for the guys that he had actually been putting away. He was doing defense work for these lawyers. But anyway, his wife gets friendly with a group of people up there who were very, very Christian, very Catholic area. And they talked her into going to a retreat, a couples retreat, to renew, the love for one another, etc. And while they go, she talks Jimmy into going. And while he's there, he meets a group of people who are at the retreat, tells him what he did, tells him what he's now doing. Shortly after that, about a week or two later, he gets a call from one of these people who wants him to come to another retreat inside a prison upstate New York. The reason for it was that it was a group called the Kairos, was the name of the group. And it was a group of people who ultimately would go back into the prison and counsel inmates, give them, have them sit around, discuss things, teach them about the world, that kind of thing. It was kind of almost ministering to these people. Now, Jimmy was not terribly interested. He said to me, Mike, he said, I used to put these guys away. I'm now sitting at the table with them, talking about their problems and listening. So he goes, he says it's 4 days, Thursday through Sunday. And he was at a table. He was the leader, and he had a table full of inmates. And he said, surprisingly, it went better than I thought. I didn't know if it was something that I should do. So what happens is he had to come back on the Tuesday after Sunday was the last day, come back on the Tuesday to kind of recap with the same people at his table, as well as the other leaders of the groups. He said, Mike, my table was the only table where everybody that was there on Sunday showed up on Tuesday. He said, so maybe I had an impact on some of these people.
That's beautiful.
But, he felt good about having done it. He took a step. But now, because he was so successful, they wanted him to become a permanent Christian minister in the prison. He was not certain that he wanted to do that. First of all, it would take time away. And anyway, one of the things that he did was, he was very Catholic. And one of the things that he did was on Good Friday, not Good Friday, the first Friday of every month in the Catholic religion, there is an adoration of the Blessed Sacrament all day long. And a parishioner usually sits and is the sort of the guardian of the.
Yeah, it's supposed to be someone present at all times. Yeah.
So Jimmy had 11 p.m. to midnight on the day that he had to go. And he was trying to figure out whether or not he wanted to do this ministry. They kept bothering, his friends kept saying, you're good at it, let's do it. He didn't know whether he should do it. So he told me very candidly, he says, Mike, I prayed. I was there in church for an hour. I just asked God to give me some kind of a sign. Let me know whether or not I should do this. He goes out. He said it was a cold November night. And he went to his car and he looked up for some reason, and there was a shooting star that shot across the sky. He took that as the signal that he should do this.
Yeah.
He went to be trained. He he has now done this for well over 20 years in both federal prison and state prison. And the reason I tell you this is that he has made an impact on these guys who I've just talked to you about, the guys who are, the lowest of the low,
Hmm.
actually at some point have accepted what Jimmy has offered to them. And he doesn't speak to them, as, down to them.
Sure.
And tries to tell them about, that there's a life beyond what you have done and things of that nature. And I'll give you one example of how well this had gone. Well, let me tell you why we call it Hard Guys Cry. He tells the story that he goes in one day to his group, and there was a guy in the group who was forgot now, he told me his nationality. It doesn't make a difference, but this guy hated Asians, hated them. He said that he just despised them. And he constantly talked about it, Anyway, one night, Jimmy is there around the table, and this guy is at the group, and he's bent over, and he's kind of sobbing. And Jimmy said to him, says, what's going on? What happened? He said, Jimmy, he said, something happened in my cell. He says, I just can't believe it. He said, Jimmy thought the worst, of course. He said, what'd you do? You get into trouble?
Did you kill your cellmate?
He said, says, there was this Asian guy that came into my cell block, and someone stole his shoes. He said, Jimmy, the guy had no shoes. He said, so what I did was I gave him a pair of mine to an Asian guy. He said, I would not have done that except for you, for doing, the teaching that you did for me, the counseling that you provided for me. And he was crying over it because he was so, not tears of sadness, tears of joy that he had advanced himself to the point where he could now overlook this hatred for these Asian people. And he gave this guy a pair of shoes so he wouldn't have to suffer in there without having the shoes. One other example, and Jimmy is very proud of
beautiful. Yeah.
One other example. He gets a call one day at the office, Jimmy does, from a guy who was a Boston wise guy, Irish mobster from Boston, who was in jail and part of Jimmy's group. And he was the reason he was there is because two people had informed on him, and he went to jail, went to trial, got convicted. One of them testified, or both of them testified against him. One of those people, while he was in jail, died. He gets out now on parole. And he's on I'm not sure if Boston has a subway system or if it's a train. I'm not sure, but he was on a train station in Boston. And he sees the other, as he called him, the other rat, the other guy that testified against me. More importantly, the informant saw him. Now, this guy was a murderer. He was a killer. He's killed many people, and he started to walk now towards the guy who informed against him, testified against him. He said to Jimmy, Jimmy, the guy was basically peed his pants. He said he was so frightened. So Jimmy said, well, what'd you do? He said, I walked up to him and I said to him, I forgive you. He said, there's nothing to worry about. He says, I forgive you. Said, it was a long time ago, I forgive you. And he said, Jim, I would not have done that except for you and for what you taught me during the time that we spent together while we were in jail. So here's a guy, my friend Jimmy, who was, when I tell you he was a tough cop, Tom, you have no idea. I can't give it to you all now because I'll spoil the book if I don't.
Okay.
But here's a guy now who is doing this work for these inmates, and they don't forget him. These guys go into their cell, they do artwork. pictures they send to him. They send him Christmas cards. He at one point, he's not supposed to really have contact with these guys or their families other than in that setting in jail. But he found out that one of the guys who was getting out soon, but after Christmas, they were going to have trouble. His family was going to have trouble with his kids putting enough of a Christmas together. He, his wife, and a couple of his friends got together, bought an entire Christmas dinner, bought gifts for all of his kids, and showed up at the guy's house one night while he was still in jail. And they had, around Christmas, they had an entire Christmas party and event for the kids. And this guy was, he said, I couldn't believe what you did for me. And we're talking about the worst of the worst. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about gangbangers. We're talking about drug dealers. We're talking about murderers, guys that, will maybe sometimes never get out of jail.
Sure.
And Jimmy has had that kind of impact. Now that's two stories. He's got dozens and dozens of stories of people who he has helped and whose life he has turned around.
That's
And I'm not even sure why I started the story, but
no,
the line is,
it's
this
beautiful.
this is, what he has, it's an example of what these guys crave at some point. If you can make if you can get to them, they crave this, this mentoring, this ministering, and it does work. It does work for these guys. It
No,
does. It really does. So
no, I'm glad you told that because it's beautiful, right? It's like you can't, if you ever like completely give up on someone, then even if it's one millionth of a percent, part of their failure does land on your shoulders, even if it's tiny. But it's like, was it Mark Twain? Might have been, I don't know, who said, I pray for the devil because who in 1800 years has prayed for he who needs it most?
yeah,
And it's, that's, and I would think you agree with me. That's not to sort of slide into the bleeding heart direction. It's like no one should be in jail. How, they just need to be talked to. Well,
oh
no,
no,
if you murder someone and light them on fire or rape a child or whatever, you
deserve to
could.
be in jail. Yes,
But I don't think you can throw. I mean, literally, you can put them in a cage and throw away the key. I think a lot of these guys should never see the light of day again. But you can't do that spiritually. Like you still have to go in there, even if they've been in jail for 40 years. Maybe on the year 40 and one day, maybe they finally go, like, I fucking really regret what I did. And you're like, dude, like, it is what it is. Like, you're still in jail, you can't leave, but like, hey, why don't I talk to you as Tommy to Bob instead of police officer to murderer? Like,
exactly. And
you got to be able to offer that. You always have to have a hand extended.
and the
Maybe they'll
result,
take it.
Jimmy's results show that
Absolutely.
it is possible for
Absolutely.
someone to change and to recognize that what they did was wrong and that it's not the way that they should live. It's
Oh.
there is redemption, and the redemption is possible given the right set of circumstances. And Jimmy, I give him a lot of credit. He does care. He does care. And this is a guy who would bat your legs apart to pat you down and not treat you very well, and then ask questions.
Yeah.
On the street.
Yeah, it's I want to. I don't remember what book it was. It might have been Killing the SS. I don't recall, but it was a book that was basically going through like the final motions of the actual like Nuremberg executions. And a lot of the Nazis truly were Nazis to the end. Like they didn't give a shit. They were just their last words were like Sig Heil. I mean, they're true demons.
Exactly.
I want to say there was like one, maybe two. Like not Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, but two like right below him, guys that weren't just following orders, like true believers in like genocide. I want to say like two of them in like 2 hours before they were hung or something, like talking to a priest and like truly start crying and we're like, I deserve, not like crying to get out of it, like truly like I deserve to die, like I've done terrible things. And like I want to say the chaplain or someone who I think it was like a military chaplain. And again, they're right out of World War II. So the chaplain, like straight face, is like, I mean, like we're still gonna hang him. Like you got to die. You just killed 6 million people
Hmm.
in only the way that those World War II guys could just no bullshit. But he also said he was like, I also like I think they truly repented. And he was like, that doesn't change anything. You're still gonna hang till you're dead. But I mean, I think you have to like leave the hand extended almost, you know? Don't put yourself
Yeah.
in danger. Don't let them pull you down. But you always got to try to, because if you completely give up and say, fuck you, well, now no matter how perverted it might be, now you're giving them some ammo because they're like, look how mean the world is to me. And maybe it's only 1 in 1,000, but like, I do think you have to do that. And if anything, I mean, save your own humanity. You know, you can't, and it's very easy for me to say that. I don't have a family member who has been murdered or kidnapped.
Hmm.
I'm sure I lost a sibling to suicide. I'm sure if it wasn't a suicide and said instead someone killed him, I don't know if I'd be able to have this conversation right now. I might be saying everyone else deserves a hand except that guy. But I mean, I think that story you told was fucking beautiful, man.
Well, he would kill me if he heard me say this. He's a beautiful guy. He really is. He's
That's
got
wonderful.
it's when I first met him, we were chasing conviction for for a guy who killed two of his brothers on the street.
Jeez.
I mean, it was it so it was a different set of circumstances, but at the end of it, we hit it off, and he saw something in me, I saw something in him, and and we went with it from then on, and I was happy to help him when he had that ridiculous the ridiculous investigation into the guy who broke into his house. I mean, it was so ludicrous that I laughed, and it turned out okay. Um, but we've never lost contact. We really haven't. And when he told me this story about he was thinking about doing a book, and he was talking about doing a book about his time on the street, which is a book in and of itself in terms of the stories that he has. And then he tells me the second part. And when I went to at that time to the book agent that had us, he said, "That's the story." But now, you know what, Tom? You know why my agent tells me? He said nobody wants to hear or be a part of a book about a good cop. Nobody wants that.
Well,
It's not that nobody will buy a book because they don't want to believe that there are good cops. They don't want to believe that. That
it's
doesn't fit the narrative that's in place. But this to me is a story that transcends, the fact that he was a cop. It's a human story
yeah,
about, in my
yeah.
opinion, about redemption, and it's redemption on his part as well as the part of the people who he ministers to all the time. It's not a one-sided story. It's a very multifaceted story, and I really think I'm not giving up. I keep constantly presenting it to different situations and different people to see if one of these days someone's going to say, you know what, that's a good book, do it.
You
So
you should try to get him on here and tell some of his stories, and then
well, I'll talk to him about it.
I
I'll
mean
talk
that
to him.
that might help advance the
Yeah.
possibility of it becoming a book. And if even if it doesn't, at least get your story out and like let the because you're right. It's not this isn't a cop story. It's a redemption. It's a timeless tale, right? You could tell this story in 5,000 BC.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But he's a great guy, and as I said, a hard charger, no doubt about it. When he was a cop, but now
Hmm.
he's a hard charger in another way. Now his focus is on doing good for these people, these guys who are who are locked up, but there's something in them that he touches that kind of allows them to change and to
Hmm.
to become a different person.
Hmm.
I mean, the guy when I didn't get the force of the guy on the train in Manhattan, in Boston, until he told me what kind of guy the guy was. You know, he was a hardened mobster, a hardened guy, had killed people, he was just one of the bad guys, a real bad guy. And yet, look at what happened. I mean, to me, that story really got to me when he told me the story of the guy with the train and the informant. I said to myself, boy, this is something that needs to be told. People need to hear this, you know. So
Well, please ask him to come on here
I
if you'd
will.
like.
I will.
For now, Mr. Vecchione, let's wrap this one up. And we didn't even get into the story of the guy of the story. I believe was in Crooked Brooklyn, about stabbing the girl in the back and the blade came out in the front. We were supposed to cover that today. We didn't we didn't get a link into it. So I'll shoot you a text and we'll do one like last time. We'll just kick it out like a month. And
good. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put your books in the description on Amazon, Friends of the Family and Crooked Brooklyn.
And let me just say
Murder on the Bridge, Hand of the Killer.
Yeah, Hand of the Killer, very good. And the new book, because of the pandemic, the way things have developed, publisher's going to release it sometime in spring of 2022. So we're going to have to wait. But when it comes out, the name of it will be Homicide is My Business. And it's about a hitman from Sicily. And those stories are even are great. So, but we'll do Amy Watkins next.
Yeah. I enjoy my monthly correspondence with criminal investigator correspondent Mike Vecchione, and I need to get like a news label for you right under, and you'll be my correspondent in the field.
Very good, Tom. It's a pleasure every time we.
Hey man, it's fucking great. I love talking to you, man. You're a badass. You got great stories, and shit that I'm too much of a pussy to ever go near. So I like getting I get to dip my feet in the safety of my home. But you've got 6 stories, man, and I mean, and today that was beautiful, right? That was a beautiful story, man. It's I've had Dale Comstock on here a million times, youngest ever member of Delta Force, worked for the CIA. That guy is James Bond.
Yeah.
But I mean, every once in a while you'll kind of see it slip through. He'll talk about the importance of like veterans' mental health, and it's not all bombs and explosions and helicopters.
Oh.
You do see the love and the light come through, and you're like, this is a guy that's like doing the right thing. And I mean, it's clear with you, and it's clear with your story is that like, it's what's that saying? Was it Otto von Bismarck? I don't remember who the fuck it was. It's an iron fist and a velvet glove, and that's actually a terrible analogy because that was an analogy that was talking about how to take over a country. So that was a terrible analogy. That was a terrible. Fuck that. Scratch that from your memory. It's about using the law when you need to, but still like maintaining your humanity. I'm digging myself in a hole, so let's wrap this one up. I'm fucking dumb.
You're getting closer.
It's like you're the lawyer. You're like, Tom, stop talking.
Well, I'll leave you this. My father used to say this to me all the time about when he knew what I did for a living, obviously. And he said, always do the right thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds very simplistic or simple, but when you think about it, if you follow it, then you don't have to worry about getting into trouble.
Or Winnie the Pooh. You don't need to remember a thing if you just tell the truth.
There you go.
It's pretty simple, man. It's pretty simple.
On that note,
let's wrap this bitch up. Mr. Vecchione, always a pleasure. I'll put your books in the description. I'll text it to you when it's up, and I'll text you later today, and we'll set up the next one. Thank you, my man.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God bless everyone.